My parents laughed at my online business for years, until I made $3 million. Now they want half. When I was a kid, my parents always told me that real jobs were the only way to live a respectable life. My dad worked a government job, clocking in at 8 and out at 4, and my mom was a nurse. They weren't wealthy, but they lived comfortably, and they expected me to follow the exact same path. School, college, stable 9 to 5. No risks, no dreams, just steady paychecks and pension. The thing is, I never wanted that life. When I was 13, I stumbled across a forum about making money online, dropshipping, digital products, coding side projects, blogging. It fascinated me. I started tinkering, building little websites, flipping cheap domain names, selling handmade designs on a marketplace that barely existed back then. Every time my parents caught me, they'd roll their eyes. My dad would say, "You think sitting on a computer is work? That's not a job, that's laziness." My mom would joke about me being the family dreamer who's going to end up broke and living in our basement. They didn't just doubt me. They mocked me. At family dinners, my dad would bring up my fake businesses as the punchline. My uncles would laugh. My cousins thought it was hilarious. Even birthdays turned into a running gag. They once bought me a plastic toy cash register, wrapped it up, and said, "Here, this is the only business you'll ever run." I laughed with them on the outside, but inside, it burned. By 16, I was obsessed with proving them wrong. I worked part-time jobs at fast food places just to fund my online projects. I spent every spare hour coding, learning marketing, teaching myself design. I failed over and over. Websites with zero traffic. Products no one bought. Ads that drained my last $200 with no return. My parents never once said, "Keep trying." Instead, they said, "See? If you just focused on school instead of these stupid schemes, you wouldn't be wasting your life." By the time I graduated high school, I had saved $4,000 from part-time jobs and small freelance gigs online. I decided not to go straight to college. That caused an explosion in my house. My dad yelled that I was throwing away my future, my mom cried and said I was embarrassing the family. I told them I wanted 1 year, just one, to try building something real with my online work. They told me if I didn't go to college, I was on my own. And they meant it. That year was the hardest of my life. I moved into a crappy one-bedroom apartment with peeling paint and roaches in the kitchen. I ate instant noodles for weeks at a time. I worked 14-hour days trying to turn my skills into income. I did freelance design, copywriting, built small e-commerce shops for others. It was barely enough to survive. Meanwhile, my parents didn't call. The only time I heard from them was an email from my dad with a job listing at the local warehouse. He said, "This is the last chance before you ruin your life." But slowly, things shifted. One of my e-commerce stores started making sales. At first, $50 in a day. Then $100. I reinvested everything. I barely ate. I lived like a ghost. Within 6 months, that store was making $2,000 a month. I couldn't believe it. By the end of the year, it was at $8,000. I had never seen that kind of money in my life. I tried to tell my parents. I called them one night, excited, wanting to share. My dad cut me off, $8,000. That's not stable. You'll burn through it. You need a real career. My mom said, "We just want you to stop embarrassing yourself. Come home, get a degree, and stop pretending you're some entrepreneur." I hung up. That was the moment I realized I was truly on my own. Over the next 3 years, I built everything they said I couldn't. I expanded into multiple stores, launched digital courses, hired remote workers, and reinvested smart. My business exploded. There were months I cleared 6 figures in profit. By year 4, my net worth crossed $1 million. By year 5, I had hit $3 million in revenue, with multiple streams of income, and a financial security my parents had never even dreamed of. That's when they came back. It started with little messages from my mom, "Hey honey, how are you? We miss you." Then from my dad, "Your mother says you're doing well. Maybe we can talk." I was cautious, but I thought maybe they were finally proud. I agreed to meet. I'll never forget sitting at that dinner table. My mom smiled like nothing had ever happened. My dad patted my shoulder and said, "So, we hear you've been successful. We knew you had potential." They didn't apologize for years of mocking me. They didn't acknowledge the pain of being cut off. Instead, they cut straight to what they wanted. "You know, family shares everything. It's only fair you help us out now. You wouldn't have gotten here without us raising you, after all. We think it would be right if you gave half of what you made to the family." Half. They said it like it was nothing. Like it was normal. Like I owed them. I sat there stunned, trying to process it. My parents had given me nothing but ridicule and obstacles. They hadn't believed in me, hadn't supported me, hadn't lifted a single finger to help me survive those early years. And now that I had finally built something, they thought they deserved half. I told them no. Calmly, firmly. No. That's when the anger came. My dad's face turned red. He said I was ungrateful, that I wouldn't have survived childhood without them, that every dollar I made was thanks to them raising me. My mom started crying, saying I was cruel and selfish. They told me family comes before money, and that I was choosing greed over blood. That was the night everything truly broke. The fallout. After that dinner, I drove home shaking with anger. It wasn't just that they asked for money, it was the entitlement. The way they said half, like I had no right to refuse. Like all my sleepless nights, all my failures, all my risks, didn't matter. I ignored their calls for a while, but that didn't stop them. Within a week, I started hearing from extended family. An aunt messaged me on Facebook, "Your parents said you're being selfish. Don't forget who raised you." My cousin texted, "Dude, just give them something. They're your parents." Even my grandmother called, confused and upset, asking why I was withholding money from my parents. They had turned the entire family against me. I tried explaining. I told my grandmother that my parents had mocked me, refused to help, and only came back when I was successful. She didn't get it. She said, "But they're your parents. Parents always deserve." I hung up feeling more alone than ever. It got worse. My dad actually sent me a typed letter, 3 pages long, where he argued that because they invested in my upbringing, they were entitled to a return. He compared it to a startup investor. They gave me food, clothes, shelter, and education, so now I owed them equity. He even wrote down a percentage. "We believe 50% is fair, given the 20+ years of investment." I laughed when I first read it. Then I realized he wasn't joking. At the same time, my mom switched to guilt trips. She'd text things like, "We're struggling with bills. Do you really want your own parents to suffer while you sit on millions? Or, your father worked so hard for you. Can't you give back now that you have more than enough?" The thing is, they weren't struggling. I knew their finances. They had a paid-off house, decent pensions, and savings. They weren't rich, but they weren't close to broke. This wasn't about survival. This was about greed. I finally snapped one day when my dad called me at 6 a.m. Yelling on the phone, "If you don't give us what's fair, we'll take legal action. You wouldn't have a dime without us. We can prove it in court." That was the moment I realized this wasn't just family drama anymore. It was war. I contacted a lawyer. I wanted to know if they had any legal claim. The lawyer nearly laughed when I explained the situation. Parents don't get equity in their child's life just for raising them, he said. They have no claim. You're safe. But document everything, because if they try something, you'll want a record. So I started saving every text, every email, every voicemail. I even recorded some calls. In my state, it was legal to record one-party conversations. The more evidence I collected, the more insane it all looked. My parents didn't just want money, they truly believed they deserved it. The family drama exploded at Thanksgiving. For the first time in years, I decided to show up, thinking maybe things had cooled down. Big mistake. Dinner started out tense but civil. Then, after dessert, my dad stood up, tapped his glass like he was giving a speech, and said, "We're here today to address the disrespect we've been shown. Our son has made millions, and he refuses to share with his own family. We raised him, we sacrificed for him, and now he spits in our faces. We want everyone here to know the truth." The room went silent. Then all eyes turned to me. I had a choice: stay quiet and let them control the narrative, or finally speak. I stood up. My hands were shaking, but my voice was steady. "You want the truth? The truth is you mocked me for years. You told me I'd be nothing. You abandoned me when I chose my path. You didn't give me a dime to start my business. Every cent I earned was from my own sweat. And now, after all that, you show up demanding half. You're not entitled to a single dollar. Not one. And the fact that you're dragging the whole family into this just proves how toxic you are." Gasps. Silence. Then my mom burst into tears, wailing like I had just confessed to murder. My dad shouted, calling me a liar, ungrateful, heartless. My aunt told me to sit down and stop humiliating my parents. My cousin muttered that I was a selfish jerk. I walked out. That was the last family gathering I ever attended. After that, the smear campaign went into overdrive. My parents told everyone that I had abandoned them, that I was swimming in luxury while they barely had food on the table. They conveniently forgot their paid-off house, their pensions, their vacations to Florida. Some relatives cut me off completely. Others stayed neutral but distant. It hurt, but at the same time, I started realizing something: I didn't need them. I had built my own life. I had friends who supported me, colleagues who respected me, and even strangers online who were kinder than my own blood. Still, the guilt gnawed at me. Late at night, I'd wonder, am I really the bad guy? Should I just give them money to make it all go away? But then I'd remember those nights in the roach-infested apartment, eating instant noodles, alone, with no one believing in me. Where were my parents then? Where was the family that supposedly shares everything? Nowhere. And the more I thought about it, the angrier I became. Because they hadn't just doubted me. They had tried to crush me. And now that I had risen anyway, they wanted to claim the crown. That was when I decided, if they wanted to play this game, I'd play harder. I updated my will. I made sure not a single cent would ever go to them. Instead, I set up a trust for future kids, donations to charities I cared about, and shares to a few close friends who had actually supported me. I put everything in writing with my lawyer. And then I sent my parents one final email. It was short. "You will receive nothing from me. Not now, not ever. Stop contacting me. If you continue harassing me, I will pursue legal action. Consider this the end." I hit send. For the first time in years, I felt free. When family becomes the enemy. After I sent that email, I thought the nightmare was over. Naively, I believed my parents would eventually back off when they realized I wasn't budging. But if anything, my refusal seemed to fuel their obsession. At first, it was small things. They'd leave voicemails, pretending to be calm, saying, "We don't want to fight, just be reasonable." Then, when I didn't respond, the tone would shift: "You're destroying your family. One day you'll regret this. Then came the threats. If you won't give us what we deserve, we'll go public. Everyone will know what a selfish fraud you are. I thought they were bluffing. Until I started getting strange messages on LinkedIn. People I barely knew were asking if it was true that I had stolen from my parents. A former classmate emailed me saying my mom had posted a long rant on Facebook about how her son abandoned the people who raised him and was hoarding millions while his parents starved. I tracked down the post. My jaw dropped. It was 3 paragraphs of pure fiction. My mom wrote that they had sacrificed everything to fund my business, that they had loaned me thousands, never happened, mortgaged their house for me, also never happened, and skipped meals so I could eat, absolutely never happened. According to her, I had promised to take care of them for life, and then betrayed them once I struck it rich. The post had dozens of comments, mostly from her friends and extended relatives. How could he do this? Disgusting. What a disgrace to the family. I wanted to scream. Instead, I called my lawyer again. He advised me to document everything but not to engage publicly. The truth will matter if this ever goes legal. Don't get dragged into a Facebook war. So I stayed quiet. But inside, I was boiling. The next escalation came a few weeks later. I received an official-looking letter in the mail. My parents had actually contacted a lawyer and were exploring the possibility of suing me. Their claim? Breach of implied contract. They were literally arguing that by raising me, they had created an implied agreement that I would support them financially in the future. The letter demanded negotiations for a settlement, or else they'd file a lawsuit. I took the letter straight to my attorney. He skimmed it, smirked, and said, "They don't have a case. This is ridiculous. But they might still try, just to harass you." And harass me they did. They filed the suit. It was thrown out almost immediately. The judge barely entertained it. But the damage wasn't legal, it was emotional. I had to show up in court, sit across from my parents, and listen to them spin lies about how much they'd sacrificed for me. My mom even cried on the stand, saying, "We gave up our dreams so he could have his, and now he's abandoned us." I wanted to shout, "You never gave me a cent." But my lawyer handled it professionally, and the judge dismissed the case. I thought maybe, that humiliation would finally make them stop. I was wrong. When lawsuits failed, they turned to relatives again. My dad's brother called me one evening, furious. "How could you drag your parents to court? They're old. You're supposed to take care of them." I tried to explain that they had sued me, but he wouldn't hear it. To him, I was the villain. Even some old neighbors started chiming in. Apparently, my parents had been telling anyone who would listen that I had stolen from them and left them destitute. It was surreal. I felt like I was living in some twisted soap opera. For the first time, I began questioning whether building this wealth was worth it. Yes, I had financial freedom. Yes, I had built something from nothing. But what good was it if it meant being hunted by my own family? I couldn't go to family events. I couldn't talk to relatives without being lectured. I couldn't even scroll social media without stumbling on some backhanded post about ungrateful children. It was lonely. I had friends, sure, but they couldn't fully understand. They didn't know what it was like to have your own parents try to sue you for existing. At night, in the quiet, I'd sometimes feel the guilt creeping in. That voice in my head whispering, maybe you should have just given them money. Maybe it would all be easier. But then I'd remember the truth. They didn't want help. They wanted control. If I gave them an inch, they'd take everything. If I wrote a check today, tomorrow they'd demand more. It would never end. Things reached a breaking point the following summer. I got a call from an unknown number. When I answered, it was a local reporter. She said she'd heard from sources, obviously my parents, that I had defrauded my family and refused to support them. She wanted to know if I'd comment for a story. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just family drama anymore. They were trying to drag my name through the mud publicly. My business, my livelihood, could be damaged if a story like that went viral. Clients might back out. Investors might hesitate. My entire reputation was on the line. I told the reporter calmly that the claims were false and that I had no further comment. Then I called my lawyer, who immediately drafted a cease and desist letter for my parents. If they continued spreading lies, we'd sue them for defamation. That finally seemed to shake them. For the first time in years, they went quiet. No calls. No emails. No Facebook rants. Just silence. At first, it felt like peace. But the silence was heavy. It wasn't reconciliation. It was a ceasefire. And in that silence, I had to face an ugly truth. My parents weren't my parents anymore. They had become enemies. I spent months processing that. Therapy helped. My therapist told me something that stuck with me: family is supposed to love you unconditionally. When love comes with strings attached, it isn't love, it's control. I realized I had been chasing their approval my entire life. Even when I succeeded, I still wanted them to say, "We're proud of you." But that day was never coming. Not because I wasn't worthy, but because they weren't capable of giving it. So I stopped waiting. I started focusing on people who actually valued me. Friends. Mentors. My team. Even strangers online who supported my story when I cautiously shared parts of it. Slowly, the hole inside me began to close. But deep down, I knew it wasn't over. Because people like my parents don't just let go. They wait. They plot. And they come back when you least expect it. And I was right. Because a year later, they showed up at my front door. The end. When they showed up at my door a year later, I didn't let them in. I opened the door, stepped outside, and shut it firmly behind me. My mom started crying immediately, reaching for me, saying they just wanted to make peace. My dad stood stiffly, clearly waiting for me to cave. But I didn't. I told them calmly. You mocked me when I had nothing. You abandoned me when I struggled. You only came back when I succeeded. You sued me, smeared me, and tried to destroy me. You're not here for peace, you're here for money. And you'll never get it. This is the last time we'll ever speak. Leave, and don't come back. My dad tried to argue, but I didn't let him. I walked back inside, locked the door, and ignored the pounding and shouting that followed. After 20 minutes, they left. And that was it. They never came back. No more calls. No more emails. No more Facebook rants. Just silence. For the first time in my life, I finally understood something: freedom isn't just about money. It's about cutting loose the people who would rather see you broken than successful. And I've never looked back.